Gail, if the Antichrist cannot be killed, how could Zack Knight have killed Angelina Ballerina? Were her Antichrist powers transferred back to him before he killed her? Or was she never truly the Antichrist to begin with? This is a question from George Marmalade underneath my last YouTube video, which talked about the death of Angelina Ballerina. And here's my answer. No, she was the Antichrist, and apparently did not expect all the Jesuits to bow down and worship Zack's penis. My guess is she was the Antichrist up until the time that Zack shot a semen laser through her brain, or until the time that all the Jesuits bowed down to worship Zack Knight's penis. Apparently, because Zack transferred his powers to Angelina in August 2016, now, when he desired to have her dead, he was able to do so using his perfect penis. I think only a former Antichrist had the power to kill Angelina. Basically, he was demanding to get his powers back, I guess, when he had his face off with Angelina. To be honest with you, I'm not sure what the rules are, but it was a surprise. Jesus is the one who makes the rules, and he can break them if he wants. If Zack had not willingly transferred his Antichrist powers to Angelina back in August 2016, she never would have become the Antichrist. He wanted his powers back, and Jesus honored his courage in battle with Angelina and reinstated to Zack Knight his Antichrist powers. It was a surprise to all of us, even to Zack. I think this is Jesus' joke on Satan. A lot of things Jesus does don't make sense to us. They just happen, and we have to accept it. What is interesting is that even after Zack lost his powers, I could still hit him with my lightning bolts, and my bolts only work on the Antichrist. So perhaps Jesus never removed my lightning bolt powers on Zack, because Jesus still sort of considered him the Antichrist. Also, Angelina was able to break through my Gail shield when she first became the Antichrist, because she extended her Antichrist powers into all the Jesuits that supported her, making her powerful enough to break through my Gail shield. Also, it was her ability to make those she wants extensions of herself that gave her brain control over them. They became extensions of her heart and mind, and this is how she used brain control on them. However, she was not able to use this power on Jesuits, because in God's deal with Satan, the Antichrist could not force Jesuits to follow them. God temporarily allowed Angelina to use brain control on those who sided with God, because Satan has these powers and the Antichrist is an extension of himself. But with Zack's defeat of Angelina, God says to Satan, "Your own chosen Antichrist, Zack Knight, has chosen to defeat Angelina's use of brain control, and I will honor his free will in this matter. Angelina can now only use brain control on those who take her mark when I allow you to resurrect her for the tribulation." Because Satan is allowed to only use one human being to be the Antichrist in fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and he chose Zack Knight. The only way Satan can use another is if Zack willingly and knowingly transfers his powers to another. By defeating Angelina on January 6, 2017, Zack has demanded and gotten his powers back, and has made it so that Satan can only use Angelina as Zack Knight's extension when she reigns. To honor Zack, who defeated her on January 6, 2017, God will put some limits on her brain control powers, limiting them to those who take the mark of the beast, Angelina's mark on the right hand and or the forehead. She will also be a transgender man in fulfillment of Bible prophecy that the Antichrist will be above the love of women, probably homosexual. Angelina as Antichrist and transgender man will probably still prefer to make love to men as opposed to women. Why a transgender man? She will probably claim to be a resurrected Zack Knight. In fact, Satan may change her appearance and make her look just like Zack Knight. I must tell my story and write the book The Antichrist in Rule 13 to warn the world what I think is coming. In essence, the Antichrist was Angelina and all the Jesuits who supported her. This is why, at first, my Gail shield had no effect on the Angelina Ballerina Jesuits, because all Jesuits alive at the end of August were extensions of Angelina Ballerina as the Antichrist. Once I led Zach Knight to Jesus, he at first lost his Antichrist powers because about 90% of the Jesuits still followed Angelina. However, by getting Zach on my side, it strengthened my Gail shield against Angelina, and she has been unable to break through it after that. As more and more Jesuits came to Zach Knight's side, the Gail shield became more powerful against Angelina and her Jesuits. But because still the majority of them sided with Angelina, she still retained her Antichrist powers. Around January the 1st, 2017, about 30% of the Jesuits sided with Zach Knight. So Angelina still retained her powers at that time, but she was not as powerful as she was in August 2016. Apparently, Jesus and Satan made a deal that whichever Antichrist, Zach or Angelina, has the most Jesuit followers is the one who will have Antichrist powers. What's interesting is that my lightning bolts worked on both Angelina and Zach the whole time. On January 6, 2017, when all the Jesuits bowed down to Zach and his glowing penis, Angelina realized she had then and there lost her Antichrist powers. Angelina has known all along that her powers came to her in direct proportion to how many Jesuits sided with her. She crawled on her hands and knees to Zach, not because she felt sorry for what she did as Antichrist, but in a vain attempt to get Zach to forgive her and allow her to live, because once all the Jesuits bowed down to Zach's glowing penis, he regained his Antichrist powers and she lost hers. I believe she lost her Antichrist powers when all the Jesuits bowed down to Zach and worshipped his glowing penis. But Zach could not forgive her when her heart really did not change and she only wanted her life spared without being sorry for her sins. So when she kissed his penis, he executed her with his glowing penis, and at that point, he got all his Antichrist powers back and more. Angelina cannot get her Antichrist powers back until after the rapture, because Zach, as Antichrist, cannot be killed, and I know he will never transfer his powers to another as long as he lives on earth. He's learned some hard lessons from transferring his powers to Angelina in August 2016. When Zach is raptured with the church, he will be in heaven and no longer the Antichrist. I predict that right after the rapture, Satan will resurrect Angelina from hell and give her full Antichrist powers at that time. I feel so bad for the Tribulation saints. She will be horrible. I do believe that because we defeated her on January 6, 2017, that God will put limits on her brain control powers, and perhaps she will only be able to use them with those who take the mark of the beast, her mark as the transgender man Antichrist. Now that Angelina is dead, even those Jesuits who prefer her over Zach will probably not be able to stay alive under my Gail shield. Things have pretty much returned to the way they were before Angelina was the Antichrist, except that Zach is now on Jesus Christ's side, along with all the Jesuits who followed him, about 90% of the Jesuit order right now. Zach is the Antichrist, and he's on Jesus Christ's side. Satan is stuck with Zach as the Antichrist until the rapture of the church, and I'm sure he's super pissed about this right now. I predict that right after the rapture happens, that Satan will resurrect Angelina from hell as a transgender man and will use her or him as the Antichrist at that time. The reason I predict this is because God only allows Satan to have one Antichrist, and that person is currently Zach Knight. But because Angelina was at one time the Antichrist, I believe she is the only one Satan can use for the tribulation as the Antichrist at that time. When all the Jesuits and Zach Knight are gone in the rapture, there will be a remnant of evil Jesuits or Satan followers left behind who will bow down to a resurrected Angelina Ballerina as a transgender man. And there will be no Gail shield because I will be in heaven. I predict that Angelina will be resurrected after the rapture of the church and will fulfill biblical prophecy as the Antichrist at that time. Poor tribulation saints, no Gail shield, and an evil resurrected Angelina Ballerina as the Antichrist as a transgender man. I am writing my books and telling my life story for them. You may ask, what if all the Jesuits abandon Zach Knight? Will he lose his Antichrist powers? No, because he is the full Antichrist right now and cannot be killed. He only transferred his powers once to Angelina Ballerina, and unless he transfers his powers back to her, she cannot get them back. Basically, Zach Knight is the Antichrist, and only he can transfer his powers to another. You may say, could he transfer his powers to Angelina in hell and resurrect her? I believe he could, but I don't think he ever will. He despises what Angelina did as the Antichrist and considers her very evil. She will only get her Antichrist powers back when Satan no longer has an Antichrist to work with. And that's not going to happen until Zach Knight is raptured. As Satan is allowed only one Antichrist, I predict the Antichrist for the tribulation will be a resurrected Angelina Ballerina. With Zach gone and up in heaven after the rapture, Satan will then have the authority to resurrect Angelina from hell and make her the Antichrist for the tribulation. Because Angelina Ballerina is able to make her followers extensions of herself as the Antichrist, when she becomes the Antichrist for the tribulation after the rapture, she will probably use the mark of the beast as her means to make her followers extensions of herself. God will put limits on her brain control powers because of our victory with her on January the 6th, 2017. God will say to Satan, I will allow your Angelina Ballerina Antichrist transgender man to use brain control, but only on those who take her mark on their right hand or their forehead. Because of Zach Knight's victory over her on January the 6th, 2017, she has lost her authority to use brain control at will on people. I will put limits on this. She can only use brain control on those who take her mark. I believe that's what God's going to say to Satan then. This is why anybody who takes the mark of the beast is doomed spiritually in the tribulation with no hope for redemption. They are basically giving the Antichrist permission to take over their brains and to make them evil, and Jesus cannot forgive this. Those who take the mark during the tribulation will definitely go to hell. In fact, I believe that if we had not defeated Angelina on January the 6th, 2017, that the Bible prophecy about the mark would not happen. Angelina didn't need a mark to use brain control up until January 6, 2017. But as a resurrected and previously defeated Antichrist, she will require a mark to use brain control in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. You may say, where are you in biblical prophecy? I'm actually in many places, but I'm really prominent in Zechariah 9:15. My birthday is 9/15/57. I'm also in Isaiah 57:9. I am the King David woman of Zechariah 9:15. And yes, it was my lightning bolts and sling stones that gave us the victory, because these enabled Rule 13 to be freed from her prison to set the bombs that destroyed Angelina's pink spacecraft just in time to save us all. I was brave with Angelina in the final battle because I know the Bible, and I knew that God would have to violate his own Bible if he allowed Angelina's Sarakaki to transform the earth as she wanted to do. So I knew we would win one way or another, even if we died and all got resurrected. God absolutely cannot violate what he says in the Bible. The Bible is divinely inspired. Fortunately, my courage and faith was contagious, and I gave Zach Knight the spiritual strength to do what needed to be done to defeat Angelina, at least until the rapture.